Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do something just a little bit unusual right off the bat here. I want you to pay close attention to your own wandering mind. Seriously, as we go through this material today, at some point your attention is absolutely going to drift. It happens to all of us, right? You know the feeling. You read a sentence and suddenly realize you have no idea what it just said. So keep an eye out for that exact moment today.
Because when your mind does wander, where does it actually go? Try to catch yourself. Are you suddenly stressing about a meeting you have later this afternoon? Or maybe you're, replaying some weird conversation you had yesterday. Or you're just distracted by the background noise instead of focusing on right now. The real question is, did you notice the exact millisecond your attention wandered? Or did you only realize it once you snapped back?
Well, behind that seemingly simple question about your wandering attention lies literally one of the most remarkable abilities of the human mind. We're talking about metacognition. Basically, it's the capacity to observe your own thinking. You see, we spend almost our entire lives laser-focused on the content of our thoughts. We think about work, our families, our problems, our goals. But metacognition, it's a fundamental shift. It allows us to step back and observe the actual process of thinking itself. It's noticing how our thoughts pop up, how our attention shifts around, and why we accept certain conclusions completely on autopilot.
Let's look at how that autopilot works as we move into part 1, observing your thinking process, the anatomy of a thought.
So, when we reach a conclusion in everyday life, it usually feels undeniably 100% obvious to us. But let's break down the invisible sequence that actually dictates our actions. It happens literally in the blink of an eye. First, a single word or event captures your attention and triggers a past experience. Then, that past experience automatically activates a specific meaning. Next, that meaning shapes a conclusion. And finally, that conclusion guides your very next decision. Boom. This whole four-step process unfolds in mere seconds. And metacognition is what allows you to direct your attention to this exact sequence, so you can notice what you're connecting, what you're completely overlooking, and how you're basically constructing meaning out of thin air.
While that rapid-fire processing is absolutely amazing, it brings us to part 2, better decisions through awareness, the flaws of fast conclusions.
Now, fast conclusions are absolutely crucial to help us survive and just, function in the world. But because they happen so fast, they are highly susceptible to unseen forces. Just to be as efficient as possible, your brain will often draw conclusions based on super limited facts, and it'll give way more weight to evidence that simply confirms what you already believe. It's wild. It allows fear, anger, fatigue, and cognitive biases to completely steer the ship. Before you've even consciously decided to make a choice, your brain has already evaluated the information through the lens of your past experiences.
But here's the good news. Developing metacognition creates the mental space you need to fight back against those hidden influencers. As author Ivana Song points out, when we become aware of our processing, our first impression then becomes an initial assessment rather than a final conclusion. It becomes something we can actually look at and examine. We can take a pause, we can recognize our emotional state in that moment, we can spot an assumption before just blindly accepting it as a hard fact, and that gives us the power to decide how to thoughtfully respond rather than just snapping into an automatic reaction.
And this awareness radically transforms how we connect with other people. Let's explore part 3, improving your interpersonal relationships. Interpretations are not facts.
Metacognition really shines a light on just how easily deep misunderstandings occur between people. Let's say there's a moment of silence in a conversation. Now, because of their unique background, one person might interpret that silence as a sign of profound respect. But the other person? Looking through the lens of their own history, they might interpret that exact same silence as a cold, harsh rejection. Or think about an incredibly common example, getting a really short text message. One person reads a tiny 4-word text and sees it as super efficient. They actually appreciate the brevity. But another person reads those exact same 4 words and feels this painful sense of emotional distance. The event itself is completely identical, right? But the meaning constructed by the brain, vastly different.
Or what about a serious facial expression? Are they in deep concentration, or is it harsh criticism? We constantly mistake our interpretations for objective facts just because they pop up so lightning fast in our minds. We think to ourselves, oh, they are criticizing me, instead of, wait, I am interpreting their face as criticism. Metacognition is what lets us hit the brakes, recognize how we arrived at our own interpretation, and realize, hey, there could be a dozen different explanations for this one situation.
And when we lay automatic reactions side by side with metacognitive communication, the differences are honestly pretty stark. When we're just operating on autopilot, we make super fast judgments. We assume meaning, and we are highly reactive. But the moment we apply metacognition, communication completely transforms. We start listening much more attentively. We express ourselves more clearly because we know for a fact our perspective isn't the only one in the room. And most importantly, we ask questions before jumping to a final judgment. It totally expands understanding and makes our conversation so much more precise and open.
Understanding how our brain creates meaning leads us to our final contrast. Beyond just raw intelligence, the engine versus the steering wheel. So we obviously place a massive premium on intelligence in our society, right? But raw processing power is literally only half the equation. High intelligence is a phenomenal tool. It's like having this massive, powerful engine in a sports car. But the true quality of our judgment, our ability to actually navigate the road without crashing, that entirely depends on metacognition. Think of metacognition as the steering wheel. It's the ability to spot our own assumptions and our willingness to question those initial conclusions when new information pops up. I mean, a powerful engine is totally useless and honestly kind of dangerous if you have no way to steer the car. And it's this combination that leads to true discernment. Discernment is the ability to distinguish wisely by bringing together 4 key things: information, experience, observation, and judgment. And this is exactly why 2 equally brilliant people can look at the exact same situation and evaluate it completely differently. The difference isn't their IQ at all, it's their capacity for discernment. It's all about their ability to separate their own personal assumptions from the cold, hard facts and their willingness to step back and re-examine their stance when the circumstances shift.
So, to wrap up the core idea of everything we've explored today, intelligence alone simply isn't enough, not by a long shot. Intelligence is your raw capacity to learn, understand, and reason. But metacognition? That determines how consciously, how wisely, and how intentionally you actually put those abilities to use. It's only when we start observing our own thinking process that our intelligence becomes a truly effective resource.
All right, as we finish up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final active challenge. Look, metacognition develops gradually. It's built in these brief, everyday little moments. So, the very next time your mind inevitably wanders today, whether you're skimming an email, half listening to a friend, or just stuck in traffic, where is your attention going to go? And more importantly, will you be aware enough to actually catch it in the act?